Charlotte, you've been living a health-conscious lifestyle for a very, very long time.
Yes.
May I ask your age?
I'm 91 years old. I was last March.
Wow, and you're still in good condition. You're still with us.
I'm in very good condition. I have no arthritis, no tuberculosis. I have no high blood pressure. I have no diabetes. I have no doctor.
And obviously you have your mental faculties as well.
Thank you.
And you're still very beautiful.
Thank you. Okay.
For those who don't know, who may be seeing this perhaps for the first time in later years, just in general, in a nutshell, what is the Gerson therapy?
The Gerson therapy aims toward restoring all the body's capabilities of healing. Everybody, you and me, everybody, is born with what Dr. Gerson called the healing mechanism. And it's not one thing, it's not just the immune system. It's actually distributed all over the body. It's the enzyme system, the hormone system, the mineral balances, the immune system, the essential organs. Everything works together, and if it works, you're well. You can't get sick. However, you have to nourish this immune system. And the immune system cannot work, does not work, on dead food, on white food, on chemicalized food, on pesticided food. It needs to be fresh and living. It needs to be organic. It needs to be freshly prepared and without salt and all kinds of chemicals and preservatives. But when it does, in other words, when you have nourished adequately your entire healing mechanism, you can't get sick.
And what has the Gerson therapy been known most to do? What is it used most for?
Chronic degenerative incurable diseases.
And what has been the success rate over the years?
That depends on what the patients do for themselves. When we tell them you have to eat organic, vegetarian, salt-free, if they add a little bit of salt, if they don't always get organic, if they do this and that, it doesn't work so well.
What about people that do the therapy, well, and they really stick to it? What kind of results have they gotten over the decades?
Well, the first question is, what kind of patients do we get?
Very important question.
Okay. In almost all cases, we get chronic degenerative, incurable, terminal diseases.
Deadly.
Deadly. And because my father's last book is called A Cancer Therapy, the Gerson therapy goes for the idea that it heals cancer only. Well, that's not true.
And is it possible to just heal cancer only?
Yes.
But
It's
just
impossible.
it and nothing else?
No, that's impossible, because many people who have cancer also have a little arthritis, maybe a little diabetes, maybe some headaches, chronic degenerative problems. When the body truly heals, it heals everything. You can't heal one disease and keep two others. That's impossible.
So it doesn't work like a drug?
It absolutely doesn't. Besides, it has no ill side effects. It has only good side effects, because the side effect heals everything else.
Yes, that's amazing. In general, just in a nutshell, what does the Gerson therapy involve? What do you eat and do on the Gerson therapy?
Well, essentially, a little bit what I mentioned earlier. You eat organic food. You eat vegetarian food. You eat fresh food. Nothing is canned, jarred, pickled, preserved, dyed, and chemically treated. And that covers everything, as well as, and we have to mention this, detoxifying. Because the public is so toxic. We get chemtrails, and we get pesticides, and we get fungicides, and we get toxic stuff in food, and if it's not organic, it's grown on an unhealthy soil, and the body can't be healthy. And that makes it incapable of excreting the toxic things it accumulates. So in virtually 100% of the patients, the very first thing is, with the food, with the right juices, we force the toxins out of the tissues, out of the cells. Well, where do they go? They go into the bloodstream. And from the bloodstream, they're filtered out by the liver. Now they're sitting in the liver, but the liver is already toxic, or you couldn't be ill.
Right.
So now we got to help the liver, because if we don't help the liver and just push more chemicals into the liver, the patient could die.
So you're pushing the chemical into the liver with fresh juices?
No, we are not pushing it into the liver, we're pushing it into the tissues. The tissues let it go into the bloodstream, and the bloodstream deposits it in the filter system, which is the liver. In a way, what you said is correct, but it's not direct, it's not one step. Okay, so we have to help the liver, since we push all these chemicals in there, we have to help the liver to let it go, to push it out. And that is where Dr. Gerson, I think, was one of the greatest geniuses. He understood detoxifying the body. He understood that the body is toxic, that when people are ill, there's death.
More toxins flying overhead.
Yes, okay. That people are sick, they are toxic. And what's interesting, when these very toxic people have a problem, they hurt, because the toxins also circulate in the bloodstream and reach the nerve endings, causing pain. You give coffee enemas to terminally ill cancer patients who are on morphine and codeine and scopolamine and all these heavy drugs, and the pain goes away, because we get rid of the toxins that are irritating and damaging the nerve endings. So the liver can pick up more of the toxins we release with the juices, and the toxins are removed, and the patients feel better. They can think better. They are happier. They have better appetite, and their tumors shrink.
Do they ever go away on Gerson?
Absolutely.
Even with the terminal patients that show up?
We get almost exclusively terminal patients.
And even with those, so you get people that have been given up by the medical profession that are just going to die?
Very many.
They go on the Gerson therapy, and many of them survive?
Oh, many of them do.
What would you say the percentage of people that are successful in curing their health challenge?
It depends a little what they do when they get home. If they cheat or don't do it right, or if they claim they can't get organic food or so, it's not so good. But if they really do it right, we get upward of 45% of terminal dying patients restored.
Even some who have already been through radiation and chemotherapy that's...
Chemotherapy makes it harder.
Yes.
We get less of a percentage.
Because they've already beaten their immune systems down?
That's right. They have more poison in their system. It's more difficult to eliminate it. Okay? But we still have good results in many chemo patients. One exception, interesting. We have one set of patients, only one, where we have excellent results, where orthodox medicine always fails, 100%, pancreatic cancer. Gerson therapy, we have fantastic results. We have beautiful recoveries, except just one chemo treatment, it doesn't work.
Wow.
That's not true for any of the others. Breast cancer, prostate cancer, lung cancer, and all the others. They're all still curable for some reason that we haven't been able to discover. If the people who have pancreatic cancer, it doesn't even have to be the advanced type, if they have only one chemo treatment, almost none of them recover.
Wow, interesting.
I don't know why. We haven't been able to discover why.
Makes you want to go out and get chemo, huh?
No, no, not really. But on the other hand, pancreatic cancer is preventable and curable, 100%.
Amazing.
If they do it right.
You mentioned coffee enemas. For some of those people who don't know, who are listening, what is the purpose of the coffee enema? How does it interplay with the liver?
Okay. Um, way back, and this was when we lived in Paris, 1936 or 7, figure out how long that's ago. My father became more and more aware that when he gave these juices, the body releases the the chemical toxins into the bloodstream and into the liver, and they started to have problems in the liver. He said, I gotta do something to help the liver. And he put together first a drug and some caffeine and some potassium, various combinations, and it helped. And then some people complained that the pharmacies where they live, they don't have these things. So my father thinks about it, and he says, well, why don't you use coffee? Everybody has coffee. Caffeine, potassium citrate was in these enemas, okay? It has, coffee has a lot of caffeine, it has a lot of potassium citrate, no problem. So he said, okay, well, why don't you just make coffee? And it worked.
Not drinking coffee. We're
Not
talking about a coffee
drinking,
enema.
rectal.
And why rectal and not oral?
Good question. Oral, it goes in the stomach, okay? And coffee has caffeine and irritates the stomach and causes various problems and difficulties. It has oily fractions too. Caffeine has some fatty fractions, and that's always bad for cancer patients, okay? So, that has been tested. A student of my father's tested it, and they tested it on animals, and they tested it on rats and, guinea pigs and such. And they injected the coffee rectally and then sacrificed the animals, and they were watching how it traveled up the portal system toward the gallbladder and the liver and opened those bile ducts to allow the toxins to go out via the gallbladder into the intestinal tract and out. And he found another doctor tried it out by mouth, and he was drinking the coffee, and then he swallowed a tube to see what was happening after that, and he followed the tube, and he saw that the bile ducts that he could see from the top would cramp over. They did the opposite. From the rectal and portal system, they opened the bile ducts, but from the stomach into the gallbladder, it cramped over.
I see.
It made the opposite effect. So we can't use the coffee to drink.
So it's got to be rectal for the liver purge.
For the proper liver cleansing, yes.
Okay. Very important
now,
distinction.
I don't like the word purge, and people think only of the colon and the large intestine and actual stools. But that's not the total purpose of the coffee enemas and of cleansing the liver. Opening those bile ducts, yes, it releases bile, and it does help to get rid of those things, but it still has a long trip down through the small intestine, which is, as you probably know, around 25 feet long, plus the large intestine, which is another 4.5, 5 feet long, and through all of that, a little gets reabsorbed.
Mm-hmm.
So my father said, we can't have that. It's too much. We got to do something to move it faster. So what did he do? He gave these patients castor oil by mouth. And that flushes it through all the way from the mouth, stomach, through the large intestine and anal passage in about 5-6 hours instead of 24 hours. So that did the rest of the trick.
So they work in conjunction.
Yes.
Excellent.
And I hate to tell you, but in order to move this castor oil as quickly as possible out of the stomach, he had the patients drink some sweetened coffee. Drink it with a little honey or molasses or brown sugar or something like that to make it move faster. Otherwise, the oil sits in the stomach and the patients can't eat or drink all day long. That doesn't work either.
Right.
But the coffee, a little bit, like a half a cup, 4 or 5 ounces of coffee, sweetened, makes the stomach move fast and move it out and out through the intestinal tract. It works.
Excellent. For those who are extremely sensitive to caffeine, and there's some people that can't take it, do they have any other options? Can they do anything to try to substitute that and still do somewhat Gerson?
Yes, they do have other options, but it's interesting to note that this hypersensitivity, as my father called it, with enough juice, with enough potassium in the juice, with the right food, it disappears after a few days.
Interesting.
And within a very short time, they can handle the coffee also after the castor oil without having a problem, or also rectally without having a problem. In the meantime, we can use a little bit of coffee and chamomile tea. And we use a little bit and a little bit more and a little bit more until we use a full amount of the coffee into chamomile tea. And the chamomile tea has the opposite effect. It soothes the intestinal tract. No problem. It's all been worked out over the many, many years.
Which brings me to one of my questions. How long of a track record does the Gerson therapy have? Is it just but then something that's been in the past couple years, or
No.
how long?
Okay. My father wrote his book, A Cancer Therapy, results of 50 cases. All but 2 were terminal. And they recovered.
48
Yeah.
Yep. 48
Okay.
terminal cases.
So that was in 1958. Now, my father developed this therapy originally for himself. He had terrible migraines. And the doctors told him it's incurable and you just have to learn to live with it. And, when you're 55, you'll feel better. Yes, but I'm 25. I can't wait. I can't live like that. Sometimes he had migraine headaches 2 and 3 days a week in a darkened room with sensitivity to his eyes, his hearing. He was miserable. He frankly didn't want to live unless he found something. And he searched for many months. Couldn't find anything. No doctors. They all referred him to the books as it's incurable, okay? And doctors and professors and university clinics and whoever.
Live with it.
They all the same. So until one day, he also had subscribed to various medical journals in various languages, had them translated into German. He couldn't read other languages. And he found one rather obscure little journal, Italian. And the woman was saying that when she changed her diet, she felt better.
What'd she change it to?
Exactly. Didn't say.
Oh.
Yeah. And my father said, diet? That's for the cook, not for the doctor. Okay. So he tried it on himself. He always tried stuff. He didn't mind it was on himself.
What did he try?
Well, at first he'd cut out meats and things like that, but that wasn't enough. Then he figured any baby, if it's an allergy, any baby can digest milk. I can digest milk. He tried milk. No way. He was just as sick as ever. He drank nothing but milk. Didn't work. And he thought about our physiological ancestors, and I don't want to tread on any religious toes here. What did they eat? They ate greens, they ate leaves, they ate fruits, they ate nuts. Vegetarian. So first he decided in Germany, where he lived, apples were always plentiful. So he decided he would live on apples, nothing but fresh apples, raw apples, cooked apples, baked apples, applesauce, apple juice, everything apple. And when he did that, he was well. No migraines. That was his basis, and that's what he built on. And then the next thing, he would add this, this, and this. If it was something he couldn't handle, he could have a migraine within 20 minutes.
Wow.
So he pretty soon had what he called his migraine diet. And when he settled down to his own practice in Bielefeld, in northwest Germany, in Westphalia, he had other patients coming in with migraine headaches. And he said, well, the books all say it's incurable, and they don't really give much chance except drugs and painkillers. And but I had migraines, and I'm doing this. Why don't you try it? Never promised anything, never said it would cure them or anything, because he didn't know for sure that other people would respond.
Right.
And sure enough, the patients would come back, and they would say, yeah, Dr. Gerson, you know, if I do what you say, I'm well. If I cheat, I get a migraine. Okay, so pretty soon he was quite certain that this worked, and he called it his migraine diet. And he had other patients with migraine until one came back, and he said, look, Dr. Gerson, I had very bad migraines, and they're gone. But I also had skin tuberculosis. That's lupus vulgaris, it's called. And the skin tuberculosis also healed. So my father said, no, that's incurable. Must have been something else. So he pulls out a paper out of his pocket, and he shows that the tests on his lesions clearly showed that he had tuberculosis. My father couldn't put it together. He was trained like any other doctor. Migraine was an internal chronic disease, and lupus was a bacterial disease caused by tubercle bacilli. He couldn't figure that. He didn't fit together. Why did one therapy heal both? But he decided to try. He always wanted to try. He asked the guy, look, it's relatively rare disease. Do you know others? Oh, sure, where I was in the hospital. My father said, look, send me a few, 2 or 3. I'll treat them free of charge. I just want to know. And sure enough, others came with only skin tuberculosis, no migraine. And he gave them the migraine diet, and they recovered. And that came to the ears of Sauerbruch, the top tuberculosis, lung tuberculosis specialist, and they talked. My father traveled there, and they talked. And Sauerbruch said, well, we'll test it. Sauerbruch had a big name, the top one in Europe, and he had a big clinic. And he actually got 450 patients together with far advanced skin tuberculosis, tops of noses missing, ears missing, cheeks eaten into.
Really bad.
Really bad. I remember seeing some of those when I was a little girl coming into my father's office, and that's a long time ago. So, Sauerbruch published this in his name. Gerson was just a little country doctor. He was the professor. Right? Okay, and that went further. My father was also thinking further.
And so what happened with those tuberculosis patients?
Out of the 450, 446 recovered, cured.
Impressive.
Huh?
Is that 98%? That's pretty good.
Not bad. Okay, for an incurable disease, right? So anyway, this went to the ears of the University of Berlin, and they said, look, Gerson, show us. Because in the meantime, Gerson figured, if skin tuberculosis heals, why not lung tuberculosis, why not bone tuberculosis,
Yes.
and kidney TB, and all of them? And he tried it on others, and it worked.
And at this point, what was the Gerson therapy? It was an early on version.
It was early on version, and it was essentially the same: vegetarian, salt-free,
Okay.
and low or deficient, almost totally deficient in animal proteins,
Okay.
and detoxifying.
Juices were part of it yet?
Yes, but what he was using for juices was mainly orange juice,
Okay.
until for a special case he developed carrot juice. And then that became much, much more usable. So now comes the problem of he is invited by the University of Berlin to show his results with lung tuberculosis. And it was very common in those days, the so-called galloping tuberculosis. Very young people, usually in their late teens or very early 20s, and it killed very quickly. And he was invited to Berlin to show his results with such cases. And sure enough, it worked. But at that point, he found that there was other things. A lot of these patients had other problems, asthma or allergies or diabetes or kidney damage or this, that, and the other thing. And all of these disappeared. And that's where my father parted company with Orthodox medicine. He saw that he was not healing a disease, he was healing the body to heal itself. And that's the Gerson therapy.
And that's awesome.
Okay.
Great history.
Okay.
Great history. Iodine is also part of the Gerson therapy.
Yes.
And is that for revving up the metabolism, or what's its function, and does it interplay with the coffee?
It doesn't directly, it's all connected, but it's not directly connected. You know, your thyroid gland needs iodine to manufacture thyroxine, and thyroxine controls the entire metabolism of the whole body, everything, your temperature and your hormone systems, and it controls everything. This is one of the controlling hormones. But nowadays particularly, we have fluoride, and fluoride destroys the iodine and displaces it from the thyroid. And fluoride, it's not only fluoride, but it's also other things like chlorine. All of these are more powerful than iodine and are able to displace the iodine from the thyroid gland. And if they do that, then your metabolism doesn't work. And iodine also controls the body temperature, which means fever, which means the immune system, etc. It all hangs together, okay? So one thing over another, it's very difficult to say, well, you need iodine. Without iodine, you can't make it. Yes, but just iodine doesn't cure cancer either.
Right.
Okay, it has to work together, with all the systems working, with all the metabolites working together and healing the body. But when these immune system and all the other systems work, you can't be sick. You can't have cancer. I don't have anything.
You've come a long way.
Yeah. Yes, I had bone tuberculosis when I was 12. I had a hole in my bone.
And do you still have a hole?
No, and I have my leg.
And what? How did you treat it
The
back
Gerson
then with your
therapy.
father's therapy?
Yeah, yes. It was incurable then. Okay. They would have possibly cut my leg off, but that doesn't stop the disease.
It's amazing. Low protein is a part of the Gerson therapy.
Oops. Careful.
Okay, clarify that, please.
Okay. Protein, everybody needs protein.
Yes.
It's the animal protein
That was my
is
next question.
damaging.
How does it apply to animal and
Okay.
vegetable?
Okay. The animal protein usually also is connected with cholesterol and other things, and the animal protein is very much dependent on the function of the pancreas. And that gets to be very difficult, and we get into trophoblasts and stuff like that. I don't know how long you have, if you want to stay here till 7 o'clock, but we could extend this quite a bit further.
Probably not here, but just the
Okay.
basics on that.
Okay. The human body is basically a vegetarian animal. Our teeth, our stomach has the...
I couldn't tear you up and eat you?
You can scratch me, but I don't hurt. Okay? I don't hurt. All right. The stomach has only about 1/7 of the stomach acid from animals that eat meat. Okay? So they're low. And we have the long intestinal tract, of the vegetarian animal because it takes more digestive system to deal with the vegetarian protein and so on. The long intestinal tract, on the other hand, if you feed it meat and fish and chicken and eggs and all of that, uses it, but it putrefies. And this putrefaction goes and stays in the body and goes further on down, and it causes the pancreatic cancer, it causes the digestive cancers, the colon cancers, and so on. All because our bodies aren't made for this kind of food. So we have to stop it. We are, of course, using vegetarian proteins. The carrot juice, it's interesting. You know, all of these things have all been worked on. Carrot juice apparently has almost the exact same amount of vegetarian protein as mother's milk. Babies, some babies are allergic to every kind of milk. Cow's milk and goat's milk and soy milk and mother's milk, because they're non-healthy, have been raised on nothing but carrot juice. Perfectly healthy.
Amazing.
Perfectly complete. Okay? So you don't really need milk. Mother's milk is fine. But if you've ever had a pet, a cat or a dog, and they have babies and they nurse the babies from their milk from their mothers, they know exactly when to stop them. And they push them away. Now it's time for them to eat the proper food for the species.
Yes.
We do the opposite. We force the kids, when they want to stop the milk, we force them to drink it until they're 12, 14, 16 years old.
And even beyond that, with ice
And
cream
even-
and dairy products and
there are
other
a lot
things.
of people, dairy products, one of the worst, cheese. Cheese is high in cholesterol, high in sodium, and high in protein. The three things that malignant tissue needs to grow on: animal protein, cholesterol, and salt. And that's what we're forcing kids to eat. That's what the public eats. Okay? We have a pancreas. We have pancreatic enzymes, and you know that belongs into the trophoblast ideas. Pancreatic enzymes have been proven already by John Beard of Scotland in 1906, have been proven to destroy malignant tissue. Pancreatic enzymes. Okay, and we have a pancreas, but we don't have enough pancreatic enzymes to digest protein meal for breakfast, protein meal for lunch, a protein meal for dinner. Okay, like say eggs, 2 eggs, or sausages, or maybe hot dogs, or hamburgers for lunch, and maybe a roast or chicken or fish for dinner. We don't have enough pancreatic enzymes for 3 animal protein meals, and certainly not enough to protect us from cancer. So we have to stop those animal proteins. But be careful with the word proteins, because virtually anybody, if they're weak or seem weak, and they go to the doctor, and the doctor examines them and they said, you know, you should really eat more proteins, what they hear is meat, fish, cheese, chicken, eggs. They don't hear vegetarian proteins. But that's what they need.
And so what would you suggest in lieu of those animal proteins? What would you have them do?
Vegetarian protein. Okay, so what has vegetarian protein? Carrot juice. Oatmeal for breakfast. Potatoes. Anything you eat. What do you think I eat? That's what I live on. Okay?
For some people who think they need more protein or a time in their life,
Yeah, well, they think.
What would you suggest as an intermediate step for them that's not as much as you're talking about, but it's not meat either? Is there anything in the middle that they could look to?
Well, let me put it this way. If we're dealing cancer, they can't play around.
Right.
Absolutely not. It has to be strict.
Yes.
If we're not dealing cancer and they want to maybe have a little protein or maybe have a little yogurt or maybe have a little this or that, Okay, if they have arthritis, it'll go away more slowly.
What about things like the legume family, cooked legumes, very high vegetable protein,
Okay.
for someone without cancer?
Okay. Legumes are what? They're grains for the future generation, right? Dried peas, dried
Yep.
lentils, dried beans. They have found them in pharaoh tombs, dried grains, 2,000 years old.
Mm-hmm.
They put it in a nice moist soil with sunshine and it grows 2,000 years. So how come? It's because those are not dead foods. They are what I call dormant foods.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they're just sleeping there. But in order to do that, nature, the good Lord, has provided them with an enzyme inhibitor so that they don't just,
Yes.
sprout wildly. If they sprout wildly lying on a table or on a wooden floor or so, they die. There's nothing there for them to eat. But, so with the enzyme inhibitor, they can sit there for 10 years or 2,000 years. However, those same inhibitors, if you give it to patients, especially cancer patients, they still work as inhibitors of your enzymes, and that's why we limit them.
So now, if you do the legumes raw, that applies. What about cooking them and destroying those enzyme inhibitors?
You don't destroy them. You still have them, and they're hard to digest. We avoid them as much as possible. Occasionally we have a little, say, dried peas, and they go into the special Gerson soup, but it's not the best thing in the world.
Okay. How about things like spirulina or chlorella? Have they been considered?
They have been considered, and something like that can be used, but not as a regular meal and as regular mealtime, fare. And my book, the book that's called Healing the Gerson Way, Defeating Cancer and Other Chronic Diseases, has like 90 pages of recipes in the back. Gerson recipes. And some of them specifically say, not for early cancer patient or
Right.
not for, okay? But it's all there. And yes, they have a little trouble first adjusting from a straight meat and cheese and chicken and fish diet. Yes, they have some trouble. But since most of the patients that come to Mexico are in terminal condition, hey, that's good enough to persuade you.
The transition period's over. If you want to live, you need to go all the way now.
Right. And we show them
Yes.
that with examples also with the trophoblasts.
And sometimes sometimes I will tell people in those situations, if you want to go on a transitional diet, you need to wait a couple years before you're well, and then you can transition back to a healthy diet, but it's too late now. You'll die during your transition if you don't go. It's too late.
Well, that depends, okay? You can do a certain amount with other diseases that are not immediately deadly, that can wait a little bit. But with cancer, you can't play games.
No, it's too deadly.
No.
Some people ask you, and I've heard you talk about it at lectures, about you tell them the diet, you tell them what's going on, and they already have cancer. They've got terminal cancer, and they say, well, Charlotte, you said I can't eat meat, but can I eat fish?
No.
What about chicken?
No.
What about pork?
No.
But you can't, what about kielbasa? That doesn't count, right?
Which?
Kielbasa, some sort of prepared meat.
No.
Ham, bacon.
The more prepared, the worse.
What about bacon? Can I have bacon?
Bacon is smoked and salted. That's worse than meat.
What about wild salmon? Can I have that?
No, because it's not wild anymore. Also, all of the waters are chemically damaged nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Mercury in the oceans is very heavy, and all the fish have mercury, and the salmon, when they're raised, they're treated badly. No, the answer is no. Organic vegetarian is always safe.
And so, but what if someone says, well, what if I eat free-range grass-fed beef? Can I eat that in my cancer therapy?
No, because it's still beef, it's still animal protein and cholesterol, and the cholesterol feeds tumor tissue. No, you can't. Sorry. Not if you want to get well.
Correct. Meat includes everything that is of animal tissue.
Yes.
Now, dairy. Dairy is not allowed initially on Gerson, but some of it's allowed in later stages. Can you talk about that?
Well, okay. The Gerson therapy is really, really quite deficient in animal proteins. Not only that, it tends to turn the body highly alkaline. And yes, in order to heal cancer, the body has to be alkaline, because cancer thrives only in an acid body. And things like milk are acid in the body, and meat and fish and cheese and chicken and eggs, all of those create acid, while vegetarian foods and fruits and greens and roots and those create alkalinity. The body, the blood, in its best condition, should be alkaline to the point of 7.35. Anything below that is not good. And anything below 7 is acid and promotes tumor tissue. Anything above that is alkaline and helps to kill and inhibit tumor tissue. So we have to be very careful. But in a few patients, we get too high in alkalinity. So we use a little bit of organic, non-fat, carefully, plain yogurt, not sugared or flavored or anything else. We use a little bit of yogurt. But in most cases, we use very little.
And has the therapy, did it always have yogurt, or do you think it will always have yogurt? Will it have things, let's say, like some of those high protein spirulina or chlorella or other vegetarian sources?
The vegetarian sources always create alkalinity, okay? And that's good, because to heal, you got to have alkalinity. Now, the doctors need to adjust that. But we have so few Gerson-trained doctors. And if they're not thoroughly understanding of the Gerson therapy, they're, well, a good steak will help you. But that's not true, because you know how animals are slaughtered. If you had a misfortune to ever be in Chicago and watch what happens there, you know, the animals are pressured into these slaughterhouses, and they are pressed with hundreds of other animals, and they smell death, and they want to escape, and they have a lot of adrenaline coming into their bloodstream, and they can't get rid of it. They can't move, they can't run away, they can't do anything. So what we are getting is high adrenaline animal meat, and then we make it age. And what's aging?
Rotting.
It's rotting. Yes, it's rotting. Thank you. That's true. And it's full of germs and viruses and other things like that, and then it becomes nice and soft, and it's rotten, and it has cholesterol, and what little protein and usable material, even raw, there still is, it's barely passable, okay? And for a cancer patient, totally impossible. So, when somebody tells you, well, what you need is a good steak, the answer to that, my father said, is, with that kind of information, how many terminal cancer patients have you healed? That's the answer.
That's a good answer.
Sorry.
That's okay. Juices. Juice is a very important component of the Gerson therapy, 13 a day. A lot of people have a question. How important is it to make the juice fresh and drink it versus making it once in the morning, all of it at once?
Okay, well, the juice is a very important part of the juice of the living enzymes. You make it in the morning, even if you refrigerate it and cover it, half of the enzymes, 2/3 of the enzymes, and in the greens almost all the enzymes are dead by evening. So an important part of the juices, the living enzymes, are gone. Now why do it?
So it's important to do it fresh. Fresh is better.
In order to really help thoroughly sick, terminally ill patients, it's got to be fresh.
You get better results with fresh versus someone making it all at once?
I have seen patients, for instance, with lupus or some other thing that are working during the day, and they make their juice in the morning, and they do manage fairly well to recover, fairly well and slowly, but they do manage to recover, but a cancer patient cannot.
So that's the highest level is juicing it fresh.
And that's the reason, the highest level of deterioration of the body. That's the reason why my father called the book a cancer therapy. Because right in the beginning he says it's not really just for cancer. He says it's for other chronic diseases. But he felt that cancer was the most advanced degenerative change for the body and needed the most careful total therapy in order to be defeated.
All right. Sugar is something that comes up a lot and is very well misunderstood in both regular and alternative medicine. I think sugar is very understood. People will point to, and this is usually alternative practitioners pointing to, that cancer cells consume 15 times more sugar than normal cells.
Well, wait a minute. I totally agree. Certainly sugar is not good. White sugar is terribly bad.
And yeah, they're saying that because of that...
A little bit of honey or a little bit of, maple syrup or something like that. Very little. My father allowed 2 teaspoons a day with all of the sugars combined. Okay. But the whole point is sugar is understood to be real bad. Salt is much worse. Where do you hear about to stop eating salt?
Just from Gerson, usually.
Okay. Salt changes the entire metabolism. It changes the cell, it changes the metabolism, it changes everything. Well, sugar, like I say, I don't promote sugar. Sugar isn't good for you.
And I want to differentiate the difference between isolated sugar that they give you radioactive sugar and then it goes to the cancer cells for x-rays, and if all sugar caused cancer, sugar from fruits, from vegetables, from carrot juice, that flies in the face of decades of successful Gerson therapy and successful therapies based on the Gerson. And is there a difference between white sugar and carrot juice?
How can you compare the mere idea of putting it together in a sentence?
I agree, but many alternative health professionals are reporting this idea, and people are afraid to drink carrot juice. They're afraid to eat fruits.
Donsbach, for instance, says, don't ever feed a cancer patient carrot juice, it'll kill him. That means we are killing every single patient.
Correct.
Okay.
It flies in the face.
It's not sugar, it's complex carbohydrates, a big difference. Combined with minerals and enzymes and active juices and vitamins and so on. It's not the same by a huge stretch.
I agree.
Okay.
And I think that what some of those professionals are not considering is, obviously you know about the IPT therapy, where they raise the insulin to try to get chemotherapy in better. But it's my research that fruits and vegetables with naturally occurring sugars does that naturally. There's so many anti-cancer compounds in fruits and vegetables and carrot juice. A little bit of sugar raises the insulin and then allows that natural chemotherapy to come out of the fruit to get in.
Well, I go along with that little bit, and I don't like white sugar.
No, white sugar has no anti-cancer compound.
Exactly.
It's just food for the cancer cells.
Correct.
But the vegetables and the fruits with sugar trick the cancer cells. Here's some sugar, come and get it. I've got an anti-cancer substance to knock you out with. It's totally different. And if sugar did cause cancer, then the Gerson therapy wouldn't work, and it does. Wanted to talk about it. It just makes no sense. You started talking about salt. Can you talk about salt and the potassium and the interplay, and why is that important during therapy?
Well, okay. It's very interesting that the normal soil, the good normal soil that's nourished with proper natural fertilizer, produces fruits and vegetables and roots and greens and all of that. All of the natural food, all of it, eventually boils down to have roughly 90% complex carbohydrates and 10% salt. So natural foods, including vegetables and carrots and greens and potatoes, everything has a little bit of salt, a little bit. Okay, because The body is roughly made up, of approximately 90% tissue and 10% fluid. Now the sodium has to exceed in the fluid, and the sugar has to stay, the potassium has to stay in the tissues, in the cells. And that's where the exchange goes on. That's where the oxygen goes into the cells and the waste goes into the fluid. That exchange depends on sodium in the fluid and potassium in the tissues. So if you push a lot of sodium into the body and you get sodium in the tissues and in the fluid, where's your exchange? And that's when you develop cancer. On top of the proteins which you're flooding the body, and what little pancreatic enzymes you have doesn't take care of it, along with the acidity and everything else that you do wrong. It's not one thing or two. It's very important to understand it takes all of it. Okay? And when doctors say, oh, well, this is the pill, this will help you, this will heal you, not true. One pill for every ill is absolute nonsense.
Correct.
It doesn't work. It may suppress symptoms temporarily, but it does not heal.
For many people on ultra-low sodium diets for a long period of time, including Gerson, they often start to crave salt, and some of them crave blood and meat.
Oh,
what would you suggest for them?
No, I have run across maybe less than 0.25% of people who crave salt. They don't. As a matter of fact, I was just yesterday diagnosed, and I have a little bit low sodium in my electrolytes. And they said I should get a little more salt. I tried to lick a little salt. Ooh,
Straight salt?
Time. Terrible. And they said, okay, you can put a branch of celery into each carrot juice. Celery is fairly high in sodium with other minerals.
Right, balance.
Balance. Okay, that I can handle. Okay, and sometimes we have to do that for patients too, if their electrolytes are a little bit out of balance. That's what happens, yes.
So for someone who's then, if they are of that small percentage of people that's craving salt, some of them are they're craving animal blood because it's salty. Would they be better off doing the celery or even just some salt than they would the animal blood?
You know, these cravings usually go away after maximum 10 days, a week or 10 days on the therapy. And very, very rarely do patients want to go back to a high sodium diet. They shy away from it. Right. Because the mucous membrane in the mouth heals. And you have better sense of taste. And the salt tastes awful. You have seen people going into a brand new restaurant they've never been before. They get served. And the first thing they do, they grab the salt shaker and shake away. They have no idea what's in there. They have not tasted anything. But they know they want more. This is terrible. They say, well, I've done this always. Right. Yes, but they don't understand that the body eventually deteriorates. They feel, I've always done this and I'm well, so it's not hurting me. Oops. Not true.
What if people are doing things like sauna and excessive sweating? Is there ever a place for additional sodium then?
That's getting rid of sodium, and it's not a bad thing. However, it's strenuous to be perspiring, and we don't do it with patients because it takes too much energy. You need energy for healing, not for perspiring. But if they do it, it's better they get rid of some sodium than nothing.
But if people are doing that and they're excreting, let's say they're going to continue exercising, going to continue doing saunas or other things that, in pursuit of their own health.
Yeah, they feel better when they do it.
Would they be better off, though? Is there a danger that they'll run out of sodium if they're doing that much excess, loss of it?
They're better off if they stop having sodium. Anyway, one way or the other. As a matter of fact, what's his name, died for New America.
John Robbins?
Yes, John Robbins. In his book, Died for New America, he shows clearly that there's a whole chapter on people who are vegetarian, okay? And he shows also that the vegetarians who are salt-free last longer than anybody else in the Orthodox, in the trial also for what is it called? What they started in Greece,
I don't know that one.
Huh?
I don't know that one offhand.
Oh yes,
I don't
of
remember
course,
either.
from the old history. Anyway, never mind. But they're better off and last longer and more years if they are vegetarian and salt-free, and vegan, even better.
Yes. Fat is very low on Gerson. And I wonder if things like avocado or coconut oil were tested, and then how flax oil came into
Avocado
play.
is forbidden for
Okay.
that very reason. However, we use flaxseed oil, and that was proposed by Dr. Johanna Budwig. And it's the one fat that even a cancer patient can digest to the end product.
More digestible than even something like an avocado?
Yes. Because when you give any fat, whether it's nut or originated or whether it's from some other, other possible problem, animal fat, any fat, the cancer patient is incapable of breaking it down to the end product so the body could use it. Body can't use it. But the cancer tissue loves it, thrives on it, grows on it. Okay? So we have to be terribly careful with fats except flaxseed oil.
Why is flax different?
I have no idea. It's high in
Omega-3s?
nutrients that break down the cholesterol, like omega-3s and 6s. Okay? It's high, and therefore it breaks down the fat into digestible units. And we can give like 2 tablespoons a day for the first month to the cancer patient, and after that, for the rest of the therapy, 1 tablespoon a day, not more. But that is adequate, and what it does, it also breaks down the cholesterol deposits in the veins, and therefore it reduces high blood pressure. It works together with all the other things.
Now, presently, you don't seem to consume flax oil and doing olive for yourself. Can
Well-
you have too much for too long?
Yes. And when all of this information came out, and I saw it in my father's book, I used nothing but flaxseed oil for almost 20 years when I started to have problems. And I happened to run across Udo Erasmus, whom I asked what's he doing? And he said, well, you have to mix it after a certain amount of time, you get allergic to it, without any other fat.
Right.
But I couldn't handle it anymore. I was allergic to the flaxseed oil. But I had used it for 20 years without any other fat.
Nothing else.
And that was too much.
So then you think for cancer patients they should just do the flax?
Yeah, well, I'm saying the first
Right.
month, 2 tablespoons, then for the rest of the 2 years, 1 tablespoon a day, period. Okay?
And then should they eventually mix that with anything else?
They should mix it with maybe olive oil or a little other thing.
Would things like avocado or some nuts and seeds be
Yes.
okay mixtures?
Yes, little.
Right.
Okay? Going back to the original diet that got them sick in the first place, of course, is stupid.
Right, not the processed oils, hydrogenated animal fats.
Okay.
Okay. Exercise, is this part of the Gerson therapy?
Not in the early part. Not at least for some 6 months, 4 to 6 months, depending on the seriousness of the case. Because the body requires energy for healing. If you waste energy for exercise, you can't heal.
Even mild exercises, rebounding?
Rebounding a little bit. What do you call mild? I call mild rebounding 30 seconds, 3 or 4 times a day, period.
Okay.
Okay? Very cautious. Okay.
Dr. Gerson evolved the therapy over his lifetime, and since you have also evolved it over your lifetime as you've seen some things change, who will evolve this after you are gone?
Who will evolve it? Who will improve it? I don't know who will continue it further, but there are now things, new things, like so-called the new science. It's the science of defeating genetics, epigenetics. It's above genetics. And they're now showing, with the new science, that you can prevent and heal gene-caused diseases. We've done that for years, but this is the new science. Okay, we've had cystic fibrosis cured. We've had...
with Gerson, meaning?
What?
With Gerson or with something else?
Gerson, yes. But such patients, because it's genetic, they have to stay with Gerson. They can't get off it. Okay? And we had a patient who had retinitis pigmentosa, and she was blind to the point that she had 4% of her vision left. Her mother already was blind with it, her uncle was blind with it, and her brother was blind with it. So it was clearly familial, clearly genetic. We told her what to do. She has over 60% of her vision back, including color. Never happens. Okay? Genetic disease, virtually cured. And she never did the full therapy. She traveled. Okay? And so on. Now, we have seen genetic diseases can be A, prevented, and B, cured. But they call it the new science. All right, I don't care. They're helping people, that's what matters.
So it's your hope that the people trained in Gerson will continue to make observations like you did and Dr. Gerson over your lifetime and eventually
Shall
make
we
it even
ask
better?
Kayla? Well, yes, there are doctors. Beata Bishop, who is a recovered, 33-year recovered melanoma patient, terminal, she set up a clinic in Hungary where they're Gerson-trained physicians. Not only Gerson-trained, they were themselves Gerson patients.
Yes, that's the best.
Okay? And they can carry on. And I don't know, we have some people here and we have training sessions, and it's very difficult to get doctors to change because they're also being attacked.
Yes.
So, well, let's say we hope so.
Yes, on a positive note.
And the doctors that we have now at the Gerson Clinic in Mexico, they're good. And they can carry on yet for a while.
And on a positive note, even though doctors are being attacked and alternative medicine is still being attacked, Gerson therapy is more known today than in the history of the planet. And not only Gerson therapy, but dozens and dozens and dozens of therapies that have borrowed aspects of the Gerson therapy and then are doing. So it's just a huge pyramid.
It's
just getting bigger.
Yes. And you know, my book, the last one, the major book that's called Healing the Gerson Way, Defeating Cancer and Other Diseases, has been translated into 12 languages. It's distributed all over the world. People are begging for it. They know doctors can't help them. They know drugs don't help them. They want to know, how am I going to take care of myself? And it's there. It's there. They can do it.
And that outreach that you've done,
Yeah.
what your father did was amazing, and you've taken it and spread it out so
Yes,
big.
Not only
So
that,
big.
well, I've had helpers, okay?
Of course.
My family and the other doctors
Yes.
and nurses and everything. But yes, that's true. But we've also had to adapt because the FDA has forbidden
Yes.
this and have forbidden that, and we've found a little bit of other things to take their places. So we have had to adapt and change a little as possible.
How do you want to be remembered?
As being interested in healing people and helping as much as I can, as long as I can.
I think you can be assured of that.
Okay. And by people like you who are helping to publicize this information, to spread it around. I need all of these people. I can't do it all by myself.
Well, I can guarantee I will remember you, and so will millions of others for all time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlotte.